You may be seated. Yasher Koach. Shabbat Shalom and Shana Tova. You've got that double down very nicely. So there have not been a lot of bright silver linings to the cloud that we have been dealing with over our last 6, 7, 8, 9 months, depending upon where you are. But one little bright spot, in my life at least, has been near the beginning of the lockdown. We were able to start, through Temple Israel, a small Dungeons & Dragons role-playing game. Sunday night, just a few hours, just a few people have signed up. Just for our kids. I'm sorry, those of you who are old, maybe you want to join in. Talk to me later. We can set up an adult group if you like. And if you are a kid and you do want to join and you have not yet joined, talk to me as well, and maybe we can work your character in. For those of you who don't know, Dungeons & Dragons, despite the fierce name, is a collaborative storytelling experience. It's playing a game where you play a character, you play a role, why it's called role-playing, and in the process of playing the role, there is somebody that is laying out the world that you are inhabiting, that you are working in. Usually colloquially called the Dungeon Master. That's me. Finally in my life I have the power. Finally I am actually in charge. Something that never really happened when I became a husband, something that never happened when I became a father, and didn't exactly happen when I became a rabbi either. But at least as the Dungeon Master, I'm in charge. Kind of. Like I mentioned, it is a collaborative storytelling experience, which means I will lay out different scenarios and I will play all the other people and creatures in the world that they encounter. But ultimately, what they choose to do with those other people and creatures is up to them. That is their agency. That is their decision. If I put somebody in front of them that I imagine they are going to attack, but instead they make them a friend, that's not my plans subverted. That is them exercising their free will. On the other hand, if I put a puzzle in front of them that I expect will take them 2 minutes to solve, after an hour, I begin to wonder whether or not I did this right. And I hear one of our participants chuckling on the other side of the room. This is where it gets tricky. Trying to allow those who are involved to unravel the mysteries so that they can be mysteries. Unravel whatever is happening so that they have that sense of discover, of voila, and opening up the next segment of where the game is headed, feeling that sense of accomplishment, means that I have to sit and wait, and wait, and wait, and decide exactly how many clues will be just enough to get them over the hurdle, but not so much that it takes away the sense of victory. And that is hard. Because I know what the answer is. I can see what the solution to the puzzle, the challenge, the difficulty is. I know everything that's going on, more or less, at least on a good day. And with my omniscient view, I can see if they are blundering towards a huge mistake. Or I can see them banging their head on what should be a trivial hurdle to overcome. But I can't intervene. I have to wait and let them overcome this. Which is why I have always been puzzled that our texts go out of their way time and time again to emphasize God's power and God's agency, but not our own. One of the most famous prayers that we have in the entirety of Jewish liturgy, which, as you know from the weighty machzor in your hand, is a pretty extensive liturgy, is the Gevurot, the second blessing of the Amidah. The first one, the Avot, is detailing our ancestors, their connection to God, and through their connection to God, establishing a link that we continue to draw upon. The Gevurot, which comes second, is literally discussing God's power, what it is that makes God Gibor, that makes God a mighty one. The most dominant theme is Mechaye Metim, the one that brings life to that which is dead, that which is lifeless, referring both to the beginning of our life, for we are nothing but inert matter before we are born into this world, and referring to the days of redemption and Olam Haba, the world to come, where we will have life again. But nestled between all the references to the resurrection of the dead and the giving of life to that which is inert, we hit three little verbs. Participles, if you want to be particular about your grammar. Somech noflim. God is the one that supports the falling. Rofei cholim. God is the one who heals the sick. Matir asurim. God is the one who frees the captive. 1, 2, 3. Somech noflim, rofei cholim, umatir asurim. God supports those who are fallen. God heals those that are sick. God frees those who are captive. Who's doing it? God, right? That's what the participle form means. God is the one who. This is why we see that form over and over again throughout our liturgy. Notein HaTorah. Right, notice I don't want to go into Hebrew class, but notice the way the vocalization happens within the root word. Right? God is the giver of the Torah. Right? Not just that it gave, meaning in the past tense, but God is the eternal giver. God is the eternal supporter. God is the eternal healer. God is the eternal one who frees those that are captive. We don't have a great single word for that in English. So where does that leave us? Because if God is the one who does it, does that mean I'm off the hook? Or, to go back a couple thousand years, does it mean, in the words of the Roman official, Turnus Rufus, that those who help those that are downcast, those who heal those that are sick, those who free those who are captive, are in fact subverting God's will? Turnus Rufus put this question to Rabbi Akiva. He said, look, if God wants to help the poor, God will help the poor. If God doesn't want the poor to be helped, and you go ahead and give them food, you are betraying God's decree. You are going against what God wants. If somebody is suffering, it's because God wants it, and how dare you violate the king's word? Now, if you had grown up a Roman and loyal to the empire, you probably learned that betraying the emperor's word was a really good way to get killed. And their emperors were rather unsteady, to say the least. So, we may be able to forgive Mr. Rufus's inability to grasp this. So, it's very simple, says Rabbi Akiva back to him, patiently, as though talking to a child. He says, God gives us the opportunity to help them so that we may have that experience, we may have that merit, we may have the credit for bringing them salvation and deliverance. Much like I wait patiently while my players unravel the mystery and achieve their victory, so too God waits patiently while we take on the role of being those who will help the fallen, those who will heal the sick, and those who will free those that are bound, that are captive. Turnus Rufus has having none of this. Too pat of an answer, I guess, for him. And he says, wait a minute, aren't you called the slaves of God? You know, avadim. We are indeed slaves, servants. It's an ambiguous term in Hebrew. And he says, if a master was to send one of the slaves out and punish them by depriving them of food, Do you think the master would be happy if one of the other slaves was secretly sneaking food to that person? To which Rabbi Akiva responds, he says, yes, but we are not just the servants of God, we are also B'nai Elohim. We are the children of God. And think for a moment, if a parent was angry at a child and sent them out to suffer in a fit of their anger, do you not think that in the long term the parent would be only too pleased to find that one of their siblings had gone and helped them until the parent had relented and welcomed them back in love? God wants us to take care of everyone. We are all the children of God, and God wants us all to take care of one another. Turnus Rufus is still upset. So Rabbi Akiva, in what I have to believe is one of the most audacious bit of throwing shade on the empire, turns to him and says, well, wait a minute. In our book of Isaiah, it says that why do you take the poor into your house? Is it not to give them bread? And who do we take into our house now? Roman soldiers, because you impose it upon us. Maybe you have to just savor that for a moment, to be speaking to a Roman official and be calling their soldiers, the mighty legions of Rome, poor. They're paupers. Otherwise, why are you putting them in our house? But savor as well the compassion that Rabbi Akiva is saying. Somebody who will rise up and fight alongside Bar Kokhba in the revolt against Rome in only a short while after this exchange is saying that, but if they're in our house, we're still going to feed them. You know, they're humans, and they are not responsible for the empire. If you put soldiers in our house, we're still going to be Jewish hosts, and we're still going to make sure that they go to bed with a full stomach. Because that's what you do. That's what God has given you as a chance to do. That is the mitzvah that is waiting for you to do. To be the one who supports the fallen. Somech noflim. You can take up that mantle. And right now there are so many that are fallen. So many businesses that are struggling to make ends meet, to continue the payroll for all of their workers. So many that have already gone bankrupt. Somech noflim, we are called to support them. And for those who have become unemployed, those who are looking for work, we have been called to support them, to be somech noflim, to help them back up onto their feet once again. This is not something we sit by and wait for God to do, because God is sitting by waiting for us to do it. And those that are in need of healing. Of course, our mind right now immediately leaps to those who are suffering either from COVID directly, or who are recovering from the long-term effects of this illness, or who are limited in what they can do, where they can go, as we can see by the number of empty seats we have this year, that they cannot come into a large gathering. Well, fecholim, we are responsible for healing them. But it is not only for healing the body. We also say that we have to heal the nefesh, the soul. For those that are suffering, whether it be from COVID or not, from depression, those who are suffering from loneliness, those who are suffering from any of the different mental illnesses that can plague a person, even in the best of times, that are exacerbated now as never before. Even if our normal avenues of friendship are curtailed, it's not exactly easy to just go out as a large group into a restaurant. That does not mean that we are off the hook from still reaching out to heal them. We are still called to be rofei cholim, to be the healers of the sick. And matir asurim, the one who frees the captive. I am willing to wager that most of you here have never actually seen somebody walking by in shackles. God forbid you ever should. But do you think there are no people that are held unjustly anymore? Do you think there are no people that need justice to be done for them, and that you could be a voice on the side of justice? Do you think that job is done, or someone else's responsibility, or God will take care of it? Matir Asurim, it is your duty. And for those who are not held captive in any unjust system, what of those who are held captive by their families? Those who are trapped in an abusive relationship? Those who are being held back from being able to see that there is a future for them, a brightness, a path that they can move to away from whatever darkness they may be currently enmeshed in? Are you willing to be a Matir Asurim, one who will help free them, to say, no, there is hope. There are places you can go. There are shelters. There are avenues. There's education that you can get to escape the trap that you are in. And of those who are mired in hatred or racism, anti-Semitism, which is unfortunately alive and well, those who have become trapped within their own world of swirled thoughts, believing conspiracy theories, believing that the world is conspiring against them, they too are captive, and they too must be freed. We have to listen patiently, or else we become one of their imagined enemies. And we have to be there to help them out of this trap. We may not have as many physical shackles as this world once did, though never forget that there are still many who are held physically captive. But we are still called upon to be Matir Asurim, to be freeing of those who are bound, to make sure that they can enjoy the blessings that God has offered to us all. Because that is the flaw in Rufus's thinking, the flaw in the imperial thinking of Rome, which is how empires start in the first place. Which is to say, if I can do it, it must be right, and if I can't do it, it must be wrong. Therefore, if you don't do it, you must be wrong. Which means I don't have to worry about you. That it is entirely up to God, or the gods in Rufus's mind, to make the world a fair and just place. Because he could not see, or would not see, because he was riding at the height of his imperial power, that God has sent redemption to the world. That God has intervened in the world. I'm not just talking about the flashy miracles of the Exodus, the parting of the sea. I'm not talking about the flashy miracles of Eliyahu Hanavi, Elijah the prophet, with fire burning down from the sky to ignite the sacrifice on Har Carmel. I'm talking about you. God has miraculously saved all of you to still be alive at this day, at this time, and be able to do what you can. And God has miraculously ensured that the Torah and its lessons would endure until this time and be in your hearts and be in your hands to do, so that you can. That is the greatest miracle God has done. Not just to allow human agency, but to have continued to support us and give us all the clues they needed to be able to make this world what God wants. God has tried to help the poor because he made you. God has tried to help the sick because he made you. God has tried to free all who are held captive because he made you. Which means if it is not done, it's not God's fault. God is a very good and patient dungeon master. We are playing out the game, which is no game. And there are no ways to re-roll the dice. But God has told us exactly what we need to do. There is no secret that God is waiting to spring on us, to make us doubt, or to make us second guess what is right and what is wrong. You all know it. We've always known it for 3,000 years. You just have to play your role. Allow God's miracle to be you. You can be the one who supports the fallen. You can be the one who heals the sick. You can be the one who frees the captive. Today, tomorrow, always. This is the blessing God has given you. Be that miracle. Shabbat Shalom and Shana Tova.